get things started, I'd be interested to hear in like what was like the moment that you remember the most of Original Sin, and that you tell other people if you are talking about the game.
The moment I remember the most, I think, has to be playing in the office there, and the reaction on the various devs around us faces as we essentially did everything wrong. And I guess the fun part is you can do stuff wrong and still play the game, but everything from murdering quest givers to burning down, pretty much killing everyone in a town. And it was an accident. It was an honest accident. I didn't mean to, I assume, set fireballs on all those people, but they were in the way of progress and I needed to get rid of them. And it was a lot of fun. I think that was the first really big moment where I had that was all the developers like, oh no, but the game still kept playing and it played really well and I had a blast. So I think that was a big moment for me.
That's something that we hear a lot from people. Like, I think I ruined the game, but I somehow managed to glitch it and still get through. And that was very much the idea, Farang.
Yeah, that's definitely the idea, and I remember that day pretty well, Jesse. I was standing right behind you. I was one of those devs that was thinking like, oh god, no, okay, we're gonna think of something for this, we're gonna think of something for that. But yeah, technically speaking, that is the idea, right? So the idea was that you could play the game any way you wanted without being judged or steered towards any predestined direction. So that was the whole idea of the design.
Which is also actually... some of the suggestions we had or criticisms that we saw are actually directly correlated with that. They are the consequence of that design approach. So I'm pretty sure that often during this talk we're going to be saying, well, that's because of that, that's because of that. But we'll find out right away. I'm looking at Thomas, if you could get Mikko Salva on the phone. All right, Mikko, you sent us quite a few suggestions which were rather interesting, so that's why we wanted to discuss them with you. And the first one was, well, you had quite a few of them. So let's start with the first one. You mentioned that in the level design there were too many items which had no use.
Yes, somewhat. I mean, there was a huge, and I mean huge, variety of items in the game. But I felt that that variety was wasted because there was a large number that wasn't really useful because... let's say healing.
Yeah.
If any of the characters had any healing ability, then all the food in the game was mostly useless. Of course, it gave some minor bonuses other than healing the characters, but these bonuses were too small to make any significant difference. And the one healing ability was enough to heal everyone between fights.
Yeah. Okay.
Healing potions were a bit better because you could use them during combat, not wasting your healing abilities, or if they were on cooldown at the moment.
Yeah.
And healing potions were healing characters much more at once, which made them useful. But food wasn't really usable in combat, especially at higher levels.
That's true, actually. That is very true. David, I think you have a few things to say about that. At least about the... well, David... He told me, like, prior to this call, said, what? Too many items? I'll tell him.
Well, I disagree with too many items because this is just the way that a Divinity game works. We want to have a very credible and realistic world in which you should be able to move and interact with a lot of things that you realistically could do in real life as well. But you do have a point about food. In the beginning, I think it can be very powerful. There's a couple of things there's a couple of types of food I think that are useful, but indeed sometimes the bonuses, this is also what I have written down, sometimes the bonuses, and especially at higher levels, are not interesting anymore, but I do think that having food in there and being able to make your own food and cook food and finding all the different purposes and bonuses of this food makes for a richer RPG. So I also think that you don't want to say like, I want you to remove all the food from the game, rather than come up with a solution or some better uses for food, which I have noted. Thank you.
Well, yes, that is exactly what I mean. If the food had more uses, even if there was less variety of it, but if it was more useful, it would be a better situation, in my opinion, because this way you have used up a lot of resources, designer time, art people had to draw the food, and so on, and it gave relatively little substance to the game.
Jesse, you've played a few games in your life. Have you remember playing the old Ultimas? Did you play those?
I did, yeah.
Do you remember eating in the game? That you had to eat?
I honestly don't remember.
Right.
I wish I did. I don't.
You remember any game in which you had to eat food?
Not where you had to eat food, but I know there are many games where the option of eating stuff for a buff or things like that were always present. I think the big thing is making it so the food or whatever consumables you have, one, doesn't take up too much inventory space or get in the way of items that are much more useful, and two, make it more valuable to want to have those instead of it being an afterthought, right? Like, if food isn't a requirement, you want food to serve some purpose besides just being there. And so if it's going to give you a buff, it needs to be something that you would waste valuable inventory space to keep that food there for. So it needs to be a valuable increase in stats of some sort, right?
Yeah. The problem is, of course, if you want to maintain it throughout your entire game, and you start with meat at the very beginning, you will almost always end up with a percentage-based system or something, like heals 5%, so that it keeps on being useful until the ending. Or do you have any other suggestions?
Well, didn't you guys try to? I mean, from all the crafting that I tried and failed to do, you guys had a system where it was, you put the water with the flour, and this goes with this. And I figure that's an easy thing. Like, bread is obviously going to be less effective than, say, a pizza, right? Like, it seems like that kind of thing where it's, as you progress through your learning to make stuff, the better stuff you make, right? So you could make like a charred steak, right? But then you could make a dinner with all these things. Like, of course, that's going to be better for you than just that meat alone. And I feel like there's got to be like tiers or level of, as you progress through the game, that meat you made early on might have given you a 1% increase, but by the end, that should give you something better because you went through the process and didn't just go, well, I'm just going to keep making meat because that's going to work, right? You should just go through the process of making better and better meals, and that's another aspect of the game.
So you need to become a 3-star chef.
Pretty much, yeah.
At level 20. You agree with that, Miko?
Well, yes, it could be done, for example, that the food had better qualities if a character making it had more crafting, for example. You can make bread, but you can make really good bread that is very tasty and gives you a bit more resistances or something like that.
I actually think that, but I should check this in data, but I do think indeed that I don't know if the food actually levels. So the problem then would be, even if you could create a pizza, or you do the item combination for a pizza, if a pizza heals you a certain amount, but you're already level 15, this certain amount is not going to be interesting anymore. So this is something we can look into. And also, later on in the project, design got a lot of interesting properties to play around with. But this was pretty late in the project that we got these things. For instance, what I would like to do is, for instance, if you eat honey and you're poisoned, the poison goes away. So extra properties instead of merely healing or giving you a strength buff for 1 turn or 2 turns. So we now have these extra properties that we can play around with. We should look into those.
All right. Okay.
That's true.
Let's-
And also, can I cut in here?
Yeah, sure.
Just with the different combinations, like with crafting, getting better food and stuff like that, that would imply that actually, would have to make about 40, 50 different type of, endpoints to reach through crafting for combining food, which means more resources and more properties to actually make it level up with you.
Data chaos.
Yeah, so technically speaking, what David said would be the easier solution to actually make them, like defy statuses or remove certain things or give you actually really helpful stuff. If we would have plenty of cash, then the Jesse Cox solution would be perfect. We'd just make, different types of steaks. I mean, grilling a
Why
chicken.
can't you guys just make money appear? What?
That's actually complete deflation thanks to the crafting of money. Why not? All right, let's jump.
Excuse me if I can jump in one more time. One other solution or maybe approach would be not to make character progression scale so much over the course of the game. I mean, right now in Divinity Original Sin, we have something like Diablo-style progression, where you start very, very weak, and you end up being this multi-thousand HP war machine that can slaughter whole cities.
You would prefer a more linear leveling curve?
Yes, I have always preferred. It is, of course, only my preference. Many people might feel differently, but giving it a more linear progression would make the food stay relevant longer, maybe over the course of the whole game, maybe even most of it. There are RPG systems where, like in D&D, you can start having, you can end up the game having 10 times more HP than you started with, which is less than in Divinity, but I feel it's still too much. My favorite RPG systems were always ones that allowed you, for example, to become 2-3 times as much powerful as in the beginning of the game. If you started with 20 HP, then you ended with 50, for example.
All right. Jesse, what's your favorite?
I guess it depends on the story you want to tell. I'm always a fan of the progression of the character following the plot of the story. So if you, for example, start out as like a young kid somewhere, by the end of the game, it's okay to become a badass because the character has matured and has become this adult with all these powers. If you're starting the game as like secret warriors for a special group and you hunt monsters for a living and that's where you start the game, the progression as a character shouldn't be as steep and crazy because you already have established skills. You're already powerful enough to be monster hunters, right? So there's no point for you to suddenly be infinitely powerful because where did that power come from, right? Like, you're obviously powerful enough to fight monsters. The curve should be pretty much straight line, except you gain enough ability to take on even bigger monsters. But you're still powerful, right, to begin with. And so I think it's based on whatever the game is. And so there's sometimes when it's great to at the end of the game be this overpowered, just ridiculous hero. And other times it definitely should be more tactical. Like you're not necessarily superpowered, but you have the ability to change the way the battle flows. And so you can still die just as easy, but you have more options on how to protect yourself from death.
So we experimented with both systems, actually. We went through many iterations of it. And so when we did a more linear approach, the main criticism that we got from our players was there's not enough difference between the levels. If I'm a level 1 or a level 5, I don't really feel sufficient difference. And given the open nature of the game, what happened is that people completely went in other directions of the game than what we intended them to go for. And as a result, they missed out on a lot of content because it wasn't interesting anymore for them to go back. So the amount of content that we would have to create to cater for that style of gameplay would have been like 10 times the amount of content that we created now. So that
Or,
was
or it could have been more linear. I mean,
yeah, that's a good question. Exactly, but we didn't want to do that. We didn't want to go for that linear design, which is the fact that we didn't want to go for the linearity caused a lot of constraints on our side. While we're here on this topic, Jesse, was there something you really hated in Original Sin?
I think the biggest problem that I had originally, and it's still to this day kind of an issue that I have, is I think it was just brought up, is that because of the I guess complexity of the questing system, wandering and exploring is something that you guys want to do, but wandering and exploring is also the quickest thing that's going to get you killed in the game, because there's a lot of times where you're like, oh, I'm going to go this way and I'm going to check this out and it's open so I can do that, and then you just get caught up in some crazy stuff and you learn your lesson, but it happens like far too often. Like unless you are specifically like going to your log and like, okay, I've got to go here and here and here and here, and not going out and having fun and trying to explore stuff, it becomes a very, I guess, like sluggish game where suddenly you're just, oh my god, I died again. All right, well, let's try this. And because the combat is turn-based and a little slower, once that death occurs, you're like, I just that was an hour-long fight I just went through. Now I'm dead, so yeah, no, screw this. Right? You have that moment of just like, I can't. Okay, sure. Yeah, all right, let's do that all over again. And sometimes you think you're going the right way, so you assume, oh, that was just a very difficult fight. And then you learn later, like, oh, I'm just a dummy, and I was going the not way I needed to go. And so I think, like, that aspect of it, like, giving it a little bit more linear feel, I think is right. Like, and I'm talking plot-wise now, is trying to direct the people in a certain direction. It doesn't have to be like, go there, do this. But I think a general area would be much more helpful than I think we have it now.
Well, we did say north west, I think, at some point, but of course
northwest is a big direction.
And
there's a lot of northwest.
Well, the big problem was that there were two gates on the northwest, and one led to instant death in the beginning, and the other, obviously, that was one of the problems we had. But it's a fair point, and it's one that we've had many people tell us. But then again, we don't necessarily agree, because if we were to do it and really guide people, then probably half of the appeal of Original Sin would have been gone, because you're also used to playing these linear experiences and not experimenting anymore, that you would have just followed what the quest log says, like, oh, ding, go there, ding, go there, ding, go there. That's the thing we were really afraid of. That said, we do see that a lot of people are dying. A lot, and so, but we do see them coming back, and that's the good thing then, because they always have this impression, I could have done something about it. It wasn't like the game really punished me, and so if you would remove that, I'm afraid that would go away, and you would just like go into this linear, progression curve through the story, through the world, which would make you miss a lot of things. Because would you have explored everything that you explored in watching those videos if it would have been easier for you to progress through the world?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm a big nerd for that. I love exploration. I'm the guy who gets all the achievements to go like explore things in MMORPGs. I'm like, I'm just gonna fly around and find stuff. Like, I'm that guy. I like the story. That's why I love RPGs, is because I like collecting all the things. I like doing everything there is to do. I like exploring all the world. I like learning everything I can. So I'm that kind of player. With that said, I know a lot of people who aren't. And you're probably right that many people would just be like, go here, do this. Go here, do this. I beat the game, I'm done, and move on. And I think that the way you have it now is great. But I think there's a culmination of stuff that makes it a hassle. Everything from item management to, like, there's this huge, like, cascade, like an avalanche of suddenly all these things combined make the just going off to go explore more and more troublesome as the game goes on. And it's like, oh no, what have I done? Right? There's definitely a lot to consider there.
Mikko, you want to say something? I see.
Yes, I hate to say it, but I agree with Jesse Cox.
Oh
Well,
yeah.
you scored, Jesse. You scored on the Codex.
I love it. I love it.
Generally, I mean, people who like exploring don't really need incentive to explore, and those who don't like exploring will not like it if you make them explore. The way it is in Divinity Original Sin is actually a little bit gated because one level of difference makes between your character level and the enemy character level makes a huge difference in the combat.
That's true.
So you can't really go where you want anyway, because if you encounter a higher level enemy, you're dead.
Yeah, that's not true. That's not true.
I disagree, and it's so this actually also has a lot to do with what Jesse just said. So in the beginning of the game, there is a lot for you to learn and a lot to do and a lot to see, and you're still trying to get the entire game. You have to explore. You don't know where to go, and it's the beginning of the game that is the least. How do you say this?
Free.
It's the least forgiving. In the beginning of the game, if you are level 2 and you meet a level 3 or a level 4 enemy, you're probably dead. When you're level 12 and you meet a level 13 or 14 enemy, then you can probably cope if you're smart about it. So where the game should be a bit easy on the player, we are actually very tough. So this is the first couple of hours that you're playing it, and this starts. The level difference between the player and the enemy becomes better, I think, once you've passed level 12, 13. And then you can start moving around more freely, and if you, I think that then you can start taking on the story in a less linear way. There are a lot of different players out there, and we've seen people that just for a challenge are going invisible and popping up and preparing themselves for battle with creatures that are levels and levels higher than them, just to get the experience and just to get the loot from them. So there is a huge difference between players that think it's too hard and other players that think that it's too easy. For one, and in the other case, I still think that in the early levels we need to fix this difficulty problem.
And I would like to add something to that, if that's possible. The vigilant gamers, you've probably noticed that the surfaces actually do damage to the level of the character that's actually walking around in it, right? So a good way to tackle higher enemies would be to use all these elemental skills to actually lure them and damage them, and to create gas clouds and explosions, because you basically don't deal damage on your level of skills or weapon damage, but you deal damage through the surfaces on them on their own level. So that was a
Proportional, basically.
yeah, that was a highly efficient way to actually go about fights that you were underpowered for. But it did require you to plan better, right? So that's why we had the oil barrels, we had the stuff there, we had the ooze puddles and stuff like that. So you could actually set up your battlefield before you started it. But it did mean you had to get into that mindset like, oh, okay, I'm near a fight, I'm going to press F5, quick save, and I'm going to move in, see what's going on, and then immediately restart to see how I can beat this. Because if you go down that downward spiral of 20 turns trying to revive the guy, just enough action points to get them back from knockdown, then wow, yeah, then you're in for a world of pain. But the game's idea was that you would use those elements to actually experiment to beat tougher fights and other areas, to actually get to different parts of the story and then find out that it still made sense afterwards.
Yes, please don't understand that I think the game is too hard. No. My favorite moment in Divinity Original Sin is still when I spent 2 hours in co-op with my wife, and we tried to kill the flamethrower skeleton under the cemetery. And he killed us over and over and over again. But we finally beat him. And then the game crashed.
Oh
no!
So we beat him again. And it was great fun.
Okay.
This was back in December 2013, right?
No, it was shortly after release, I think.
Okay.
Oh man, if you would have said like it was about a week ago, I would have been like, no.
That would have been really painful. Here's another thing. Do you think that all the dialogue should be voiced, Jesse?
Man, that's always a big thing for me. It depends on what you mean by all the dialogue. Are you saying when I go to talk to any NPC,
Everyone.
that they have a voice?
Everyone.
It depends on how much you're willing to spend on voice actors, because something that annoys me is when you have 6 voice actors doing 100 NPCs, and after a while, everyone starts to sound the same. And then you recognize all those voices, like, oh no, that's the guy from earlier, and that guy did that. Like even the best voice actors, yeah, like even the best voice actors sound like each other after a while. Like you can start to hear the way that they act. I think it all comes down to, again, who the player is. Sometimes people love to sit through all the voice acting, and sometimes people are like, okay, great, click, next. And it also depends on what you're doing. Sometimes if I go to just a guy in the market, I don't want to hear the voice acting of his day. Like I could care less about what his day is and what he's doing. But if it's a main quest or a main scene in the game, story element, then it's always fun to have the addition of voice acting. So it's really situational, and it comes down to who's playing it, or I guess in this case, who's developing the game and how you guys want your story told, right?
Well, the reason why we're thinking about it, we made no secret of the fact that we're trying to put the game on a controller so that it's going to work on a television screen, like on a console, for instance, or on a Steam box, if ever that thing is going to be released. But then you probably want to have it more voiced rather than just something to read, because you're lying in your couch, you're lying further away from your television screen, so you want to have it. Yeah, exactly. You have problems with your eyes. You're getting a little bit older, so would you want it to be fully voiced at that moment, or would it be something like, yeah, reading is okay? Like,
I remember being very young and playing the games on Super Nintendo that had no voices, and Final Fantasy VI, still the best game ever made. Hands down, Final Fantasy VI, best game, hands down, best game ever made.
I sold to myself.
That is
okay.
6 is the best. It has no voice acting, and it's all told through music and loads of dialogue, and that's how that game is sold.
Bad dialogue, Jesse. Bad dialogue. It's
I mean, there's Final Fantasy VII. Not me, but many consider that to be the best game ever made. Chrono Trigger. Back when SquareSoft actually made good games. That was like, those were some of the big. I mean, the mid '90s when RPGs were like at their peak on Super Nintendo and PlayStation and stuff like that. There was no voice acting. It was all just reading. And oh Lord, the second CD of Xenogears is a book, essentially, right? Like, it's just too much dialogue. But I mean, there was a time when voice acting wasn't a thing that was needed on console. I would say now, if you want younger gamers to play, you kind of have to. You kind of have to. I don't think it's necessary, but judging by console audience, I would say you kind of have to. Mm-hmm. But with that said, too much dialogue, judging by console audiences, is just as bad as having to read a lot, right? If they have to sit there and not do something, then that's, I still firmly believe that a console audience is a little more ADD-ish than a PC gaming audience, and so you have to be very quick about the information you're getting across to a console audience, because their normal playtime is less than that of a PC player. And so they aren't going to want to spend most of their time sitting there learning about the dialogue of a certain people, or learning about the dialogue, but listening to the dialogue of a certain people than actually playing. So you're going to want to, if that's the case, get rid of a lot of superfluous dialogue if you're going for like a console release. So instead of people in town giving you random things to say about the markets, instead you just walk up and they're like, the markets, something, something, and that's it. And there is no dialogue box, and you'd have to cut out a lot of that stuff. It might not be the game you want, but it's the game that would work best on a console.
All right, that's an interesting one. So then you therefore, because what we're seeing here is several of our PC playing audience making a shift to console as they get a little bit older, but still wanting to play those type of games and not finding those games on their consoles. So that's a different type of audience, obviously, than the younger audience, which would be increasing the audience pool for these type of games. So that's an interesting, yeah. I guess it depends on the demographics of who your target audience is going to be.
Right.
It's something that we've been fooling around with in our heads. We haven't made any decisions yet, and we've been playing. Turns out that the game does play very well with a controller, courtesy of Farang actually, but it does play really well. And so we're looking at, can we now put it in cooperative on one screen? Can we make it work with split screen? Is that possible? Yes or no? Jesse, making the bridge to the co-op. I've seen you play with Crandor, obviously, so that was great fun for us. We've seen you suffer from a number of issues. We've improved some of the issues since then in the co-op. What was your biggest gripe with the co-op as you were playing it?
I think the biggest gripe is the actual combat. It's oh man, yeah. I'm trying to think. It's. I don't think it's something you did. I think it's
Something he did. The guy sitting next to you, that douchebag.
Yeah, I think it's who I play with, but I think because the co-op or because the game has so much room for error, and the error to be, and it's not like game error, it's personal, like user error. There's so much room for that to happen that when you play with someone, if you're not on the exact same page, you screw yourself in combat. And because it's turn-based, again, it's a slower form of combat, and so you can be fine, and then 6 turns in, something really stupid happened, and you've ruined your chances of winning. And I think that kind of situation there is something that when you're on a couch together, for example, in console co-op, it would probably be easier because you can sort of communicate better on what you're trying to do. But if you're sitting there and someone's across the country and you're both on your speakers trying to work out a strategy, it's very difficult. And I think that was a problem that I had. Another thing that I think that I missed, that I didn't like, was if I was in one area of the world just wandering around, and Crendor was in another area of the world doing his own thing, if he found a quest or something and talked to the person, I would get no benefits from that. And by the time I got there, there was nothing that I could do about it. Like even the dialogue options were gone. Like there was. I'm trying to think of the one that happened in the video that I could. Okay, so a good example is we're in town, we're in the market, and Crendor talks to the. I think it's a scenario where the dude steals a fish or something like that, and he has that entire experience, and I get none of it, which I guess in the real world is reality. If he was in one area, he would experience it, and I wouldn't. But at the same time, it's like, well, but I wanted to experience that too. And it's one of those things where it's like, tough, you can't now. And it was always a hassle to me, be like, but now I'm missing the story. He doesn't care about the story. He wandered into that. He doesn't care anything about that. But me, a guy who loves that, missed out on the fact that I could even do that. So now I'm already down. And even though it's a very tiny story element, right, it doesn't affect that much. It's something that I would have loved to experience, but I couldn't. And I was the one who wanted to experience more than him, and he just sort of stumbled into it.
Okay, but like you getting the XP doesn't factually mean you're experiencing it. If that's what
and I agree. And that's why I think it's one of those things where if it was a scenario like that where there was a decision to be made, so there should have been like a bing, hey dummy, get over here. Like there should have been some message in the game that would have alerted you that something important's happening and there's a decision to be made and you probably should be involved in it, and then you can decide whether you want to or not. So you can flag, in this example, Crendor, and be like, yeah, no, he can handle it, I got other stuff to do. Or you can be like, oh no, I would love to be a part of what's going on. And then maybe you could either have access to the dialogue box, or something could happen where even if you're far away, at least I mean, if you have the magical power to teleport around and teleport, you can probably be like, I'm talking to you through the pyramid. What should we do with this scenario? Right? Like that kind of thing might work.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's cool.
Pretty much what we have almost.
Yeah.
Now, with you didn't have this, but well, you can explain it, Farang.
Well, no, what I wanted to say is that actually having it voiced would mean that you could hear what your partner is discussing in the background if you're just adventuring outside. Would that help you too? I mean, then you would at least have a hint of the conversation.
Well,
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
well, I just wanted to mention one thing which was included in the game after you played it is a little message boxes which appear over NPCs. And so if you click on them, you then join into the conversation of the other character, and you can go through the history of the conversation. So, and actually at some point, and I think we removed it, but correct me if I'm wrong, is that you could click on these little message boxes from a distance. So you could participate in any conversation from whatever distance, and so see what the other guy was saying. So, and then when a cooperative dialogue in which you would have to make a decision pops up, then you can follow it, what was said, and then you can make your decision. So what you're basically asking for is, well, whenever some decision like this pops up, I would like to have like a flashing marker that tells me, hey, there's something that you might want to decide about.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially, I get like that's again, it's more of a like I said in the beginning, it's more of a user error thing. Like if I really cared, I would be like the two of us would be in the same area at the same time, working together to solve different things. But I like to explore, and my partner did not. He was like, I'm going to do this and this and this. And, you know, you can't expect everyone to be always on the same page at all. You know, that's what a team is about. People have different goals and needs and wants. And so you need to think about how to satisfy the vast group. So maybe I'm not in the majority of players, but personally, that's the experience that I had.
All right, makes sense.
Okay. Well, there's also one small thing I would like to add to that. We also deliberately left a lot of space in those areas. Being confident that when people played the game together, they would actually, they would actually discuss this stuff in a civilized manner before shooting a fireball in someone's face while somebody's having a dialogue or stuff like that. So we deliberately left these spaces in there so that you could have this conversation with your partner, like, hey, I'm making the decision here. You want in on this, or I'm going to walk into this situation. Because it's not like a competitive game you play with strangers, right? It's usually you play it with people you know. You could, but then we'll have to build more of these safeties.
Adventures.
Exactly, safeties in them and small adventures to, give everybody good opportunities.
All right. Liam, you wrote to us complaining about the fact that this was, correct me if I'm wrong, obviously, you played several RPGs before.
Yeah.
But you never played an RPG like Original Sin. You didn't realize that it could be the R could be that much of role playing.
Mm-hmm.
And what problem that caused for you was that you didn't have a clue what to do.
Yeah.
More or less summarize your letter?
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
Pretty much, yeah.
Right. Have you figured it out since?
Not exactly. I mean, it's mainly my problem was just the journal. It was kind of it was pretty vague. I kind of I felt like I had to be some kind of Sherlock Holmes to figure out what I had to do. It was kind of hard to know exactly where to go and to know what to do, where to find something, and all of that. So yeah.
All right. Well, that pretty much mirrors what Jesse was saying earlier on, also. So that is sometimes it's hard to know where to go. But there is, other than the fact that we wanted to make exploration based and force you to explore and look around, there was actually also another reason why we did it this way, and that had to do with the fact that we have something we call N+1 design, and it is, we allow you a lot of freedom. Somebody says, I'll give you the key if you bring me the head of that guy, which would, in an ordinary RPG, then what you would have to do is you would go get the head, bring it to the guy, get the key. Here you can pickpocket the guy, just take the key yourself, or you can kill him. or you can find the fake
Yeah.
the key doors and you can burn down the door, or you can break it down, or you can teleport yourself in. The result of that is that the amount of permutations that are created in your solution space becomes so large that it is impossible to cater for all of them. Yeah, but we didn't want to limit that freedom, and so sometimes we had to be vague. That was actually the net result of that.
Okay.
So the real question then is, would you prefer us to remove that freedom for a more streamlined experience?
I wouldn't necessarily remove the freedom, because I know that's what a lot of people like about this game. It's all of the exploring and the searching. But for me, this is my first time playing this kind of RPG, and it's yeah.
Yeah. So how old are you, Liam?
I am 15.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's not bad.
Yeah.
I played my first RPG around that age, so that's perfectly okay. Well, say that, Jesse. Why? Before we talk a little bit about the reasons of why we did it and what we think we can do about solving it, tell me about your inventory management experience, which is a strange thing to ask of a man.
Well, let me tell you. I think it all comes back to that sort of avalanche I was talking about before. It's the game, I think everyone agrees, is fantastic. I think the small problems culminate in a huge, like, whoa moment. And I think in this case, for inventory, it's the idea that when you first start, you're like, oh, I have all these inventory slots and I have all these characters and I can store all this stuff. But as you start going through the game and exploring more and more, that inventory fills really quickly. And it fills a lot of times with things that are unimportant to what you're doing. And so suddenly you have all this stuff, and then that management is not a problem. Like it's just a hassle. Like, you are constantly having to go back and you're doing a ton of inventory management when all you want to do is play the game. And eventually it detracts from the game, where you're suddenly like, okay, now oh boy, I got to do this now. Okay. And so you're going through, and I think that's something that at the beginning you feel like that will never be an issue. But when it happens, you're like, oh God, now I got to do all this now. And then you're not sure what to keep and what to get rid of, because you never know what you found maybe that is valuable. And because it's this whole exploration thing, if you think it's valuable, it may or may not be. It just looks like something that you might use one day. And you're like, oh, I better hold on to that. And suddenly you're holding on to a bunch of things that you don't know whether you'll ever need or not, but they're just in your inventory. And so now you have this inventory filled with stuff, and it's like, what do I do?
Yeah, okay. I mean, that follows automatically by the fact that you can interact with all these items in the game world. And so, our big question, the big question, Mr. Jesse Cox, is like, help us solve it. How can we do it better? Like, do we reduce interactivity? Do we reduce the amount of items in the world?
I think it doesn't have to do with reducing the amount of items. It has to do with making it clear what each item can do, making it, or have each item have a value. It may not be seen right away, but each item can do something for you. That I mean,
then you would hold on to everything, right, Jesse?
Well, I'm saying like if you get a bunch of weapons, right? Like if you find a bunch of weapons, but they're all junk weapons, I mean, this is probably for a future RPG, but the ability to just throw a weapon at a dude, you get rid of the weapon, and then you chuck a weapon at a man. And so I collected a bunch of really awful weapons, but I just chucked a spear at a dude. I lost the weapon, but that was a really cool way to get rid of a weapon instead of having to hold it till I get back and sell it. Right? It get like just an additional option of something to do with stuff that's in the game. Also, I think more creative ways of stacking things. So, or separate bags for different things. So you have like your food bag, right? And you have so things go in different places. So it's a little more organized, because a lot of the times players would have to organize stuff the way and I get that, like, oh, a player's going to organize things the way a player wants to organize, and we're going to give them that freedom. But sometimes, especially, if you take it to a console level, that's just too much work. To get like just to have the option of being like, we have all these different things. We can put your different things and it goes there, and then B is for this and shift B is for that. You have all your different ways to get to it. And I think that would help as well. There's definitely different ways to go, rather than be like, we're going to give you the freedom to do it all. Sometimes be like, this is the way this works, but we're giving you the freedom to change it within it. Like, you can order your potatoes from big to small all you want, but it's going to be in the potato bag, right? Like, that's like something like that. I think would be nice.
Like, would it be useful to tag items to be sellable items, like that you go to the trader and say, just sell everything I tag that's sellable or stuff like
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that?
Yes.
Okay.
That would help
Stuff
a
like,
great deal.
Well, we had suggestions like multiple item selection, renaming of containers, bigger containers, more shortcut keys, more stacking. I think that one point we didn't bring up with Miko Silva earlier on was random loot generation. Obviously, Diablo is very much about random loot. Then obviously nowadays it's all about legendary items, obviously. But he said like you have too much random loot, and actually in a game like Original Sin you shouldn't have random loot. What's your thoughts about that?
I think it's very strange. I think the game has a weird mechanic where you can be in a store and see a weapon and then get that weapon, but when you're out in the world, you would expect a certain enemy to drop a certain weapon because it goes with what that enemy is, but that isn't what happens. Mm-hmm. They may think that's what you were going for because you can see signs of it in the game, but it's not what happens all the time. Like you expect, like if a guy has his badass weapon, that you're gonna get that badass weapon. Like I think that's something that all RPGs strive for, right? Like if you're fighting a guy and he has a giant flaming sword, when you kill him, I'm taking that flaming sword. But that's something that doesn't happen all the time, and I think that would be something that you could easily make work really well in the game. Is have that aspect of like just throw a weapon on a guy and then you kill him and you get that weapon. It gives you goals to go after instead of just randomization, right? And so you don't get like a really crappy weapon from killing a guy that you have been stalking forever trying to complete the quest. Like, but that dude has my father's uncle's sword and I want to get it back, right? And then you kill him and then he has like the dagger of knowledge. You're like, what the hell is this? And I feel like that's something that could easily be implemented.
Some more specific loot tables. But still loot tables or one specific weapon?
Crap. Honestly, I feel like this is more of the game you want to make kind of deal, where if that's what you want to do and give them... I mean, me personally, I would make it a specific weapon. I'm always a fan of certain guys have certain armor and certain weapons, and they aren't going to drop a robe of health if it's like Gorgoth, the barbarian warlord. Like, why the hell would he have that on him? There's no reason for him to have that. He might have shoulder pads of doom. That makes sense. But there's no reason for him to have, like, the Staff of Ever-Living Life. Like, no! That guy's Gorgoth the warlord. He's not going to have that. And so I feel like loot table in that case would be dumb. He has what he has, and that's what you get for killing him. Now, maybe a second in command like Nilbog the Heel Master, he might have some stuff for you. But, I feel like very specific loot for very specific guys is the way that I would make a game.
All right, David?
This is currently how it is. So we look at an enemy. If it's just your run-of-the-mill grunt enemy, we see what type of role does he have. Is he an archer? Is he a fighter? Is he a wizard? Is he a cleric? Is he healing people, etc., etc.? And then we give him a pretty specific treasure table already. So if he's an archer, he's not going to drop an axe or a sword. He's going to drop a crossbow or a bow. If he is carrying a crossbow, he might drop a bow. So this is the limitation. We tried out guys actually dropping what they are literally wearing, and then we tried this out. This is not interesting because of reason. A lot of enemies, for instance, prefer
because of reasons.
They prefer swords or they prefer axes. So, for instance, if you're fighting a lot of orcs, they would constantly be dropping huge axes or huge swords. You would never find a lot of normal bows or a dagger or this or that. So we thought like this warrior type, he will drop something warriors wear. So this makes sense. And then in between, we have randomization. For instance, in crates and in barrels, etc., there is random. Sometimes some enemy types will drop some magic stuff. So we've tried all kinds of stuff, and there are enemies that are memorable, mini bosses or bosses, and they will drop what they are wearing. They will also always drop something legendary. But I do agree that we could use some more specifically planted loot. Because sometimes the gods of random are just not with you. You can easily, if you just play the beginning for 3 or 4 hours and then play it again and compare what you have, this might be a huge difference. And I think, especially at the beginning, this goes back to what I said earlier. In the beginning, level differences make a huge difference difficulty-wise. Randomization also can make a huge difference difficulty-wise. If you hit the jackpot and you get a lot of gold or you get a kick-ass weapon in the beginning, you'll have a completely different experience from someone who wasn't as lucky as you were. So I agree with more specific stuff that should drop. I agree with if someone is holding the Staff of Doom, he should drop it. And I also think that in the beginning of the game, we should control more what is dropped so that we can control the gameplay more. I also think, for instance, in Cyseal, as this is the first area that a lot of people have already seen, we know that there's a lot of poisoning going on there. So one of the things that we should drop somewhere at least is like the ring of immunity to poison, or something that helps you against it. These things should link with each other. If someone in the beginning drops the coolest spear ever, you're going to cry out loud because you go like, guys, I'm fighting skeletons here. They only take half the damage of a piercing weapon. Why would you drop a spear right there? So this is the thing that we know, and we should control this more.
I think that might be your solution then to a conversation that we had earlier, which is rather than direct players where to go and make the story linear, little tiny things like giving them a ring that makes them immune to certain things, or giving them a weapon that increases the like giving them things that they would need in order to survive that initial starting experience. So I think the frustration isn't in getting lost. The frustration is getting lost and then suffering greatly for getting lost. Sometimes, you want, and sometimes in life, if you get lost in a city, you wander into a bad neighborhood, but not every time do you get screwed for wandering into a bad neighborhood. Sometimes you're like, oh, all right, I'm going to go the other way now, right? And so I feel like that can translate into the game where you can say, I saw you might want to go further into the neighborhood. I don't know what you guys do, but I feel like in a game, though, you translate that into items and things that you get are more directed to what you would need at the beginning of the game. So there's less randomness in the beginning because it's things to keep you alive and things to give you a fighting chance to start. And I think it says a great deal about when I played, and this was every time I played, every time I started from the beginning, without fail, no difference. Every time I started, I always found more value in killing shopkeepers than I did in talking with them. Especially in the beginning of the game, killing them, they had some awesome, like, super powerful weapons that early on I could get nowhere by just doing my normal civic duty and fighting skeletons and things, right? Like, they dropped nothing of value. I would go and kill every shopkeeper I could find because screw it, they never had anything good, and the stuff they dropped was like great weapons and armor. And even if it was all RNG, it was still much better than anything I had. And I was like, look what we did every time I played. That was one of the things I showed people every time we played, would be like, guys, watch this. And I just go in and murder a shopkeeper and be like, look at all this stuff we got. And they're like, oh, you can do that? And it was great. Everyone loved it. They were all really excited for that fact. They thought it was fantastic. But at the same time, the reward for being evil was much better than the reward for just doing my job and being a hero. And so I would constantly just, if there was someone to murder, I would kill them because screw it. I'll figure out a way to do that quest, and whatever they had, I would get. I mean, right? It seemed better to be bad at the beginning of the game because being bad got you more stuff. And people are like, but who are you going to sell stuff to? It's like, at that point, it doesn't matter. I'm so convoluted with my inventory, I'm just throwing stuff out anyway, so I got the best items. Right? Screw selling. I'm just going to go steal from everybody.
The cheese vendor.
All right. Well, I mean, to be fair, I mean that was intended. All right. So this was part
You
of
wanted
the
us
design.
to be pure evil?
No, we wanted to give you the option, and we want to incentivize you for it.
To
So
kill people?
Sure.
Yeah.
We always said that you could finish the game by killing everybody. It was this thing we called this N+1 multiplayer design. What it means is that you can kill anybody. There's always a solution to take you further through the story. We had to make a lot of sacrifices in the storytelling as a result of it, but it ended in a lot of fun. All the systemics, all the freedom that is in the game is possible because no matter what you do, if we did our jobs correctly, you will always find another solution. And so if you kill all of the shopkeepers, it's great. They will not tell you anything later on in the game, and you will not have anybody to sell to later on in the game because you will... Well, we had a bit of an economic problem in the paintings department, but that was okay. And it was that different style of playing that we wanted to promote. All right. That said, the sad part here is that we actually did place all those objects that you're mentioning to help you through. They were there, but apparently not clear or not ostensive enough. We had to make them maybe a bit clearer, stuff your opening inventory with grenades and wands and that kind of stuff. Or have the occasional Deus Ex Machina pass by. Oh, are you in trouble? Shall I help you? Yes.
Right.
And then you would kill him to take his loot. That's okay. So I think that in seeing a lot of people play, we've seen too much suffering, that's for sure. So we probably have to shift the suffering a little bit further in the game, although we still think suffering is part of the game.
Suffering is good.
Up to a certain extent. But,
I was going to say, like, people enjoy the idea of that old school aspect of games where, I mean, you can just look at, like, Dark Souls, for example. People enjoy the struggle of overcoming difficulty, and then once they figure it out, they've got it. But I think the difference here is because of so much randomness, the struggle of overcoming stuff, like, you know, an old school platformer, there was always a level that was impossible to do, but when you finally figured it out, you're like, I will never not be able to beat this level again because you got it. You know the pattern, you know when to.
Yeah.
But this is a game where sometimes, because of the randomness, you can't do what you did before, and so even overcoming things, like, it's just sometimes it constantly bombards you with you fail, and when you think you're going to try it again, like, I got it figured out, you fail again for just a totally different reason now. And it's like,
that okay?
no! And you're just flipping tables because you think you got it, and suddenly you're screwed again. And I think that's something that people will just, you know, constantly... If there's something that will turn people away from a game, it's the idea that I can't beat this no matter how hard I try. And I'm just not good enough for this game, and they'll just walk. Most people, I don't know what this says about gaming culture at the moment, but most people would rather walk away than continually try to beat it.
that's not true. And I will tell you,
Really?
I actually have proof. We have this thing, the Steam backend, which allows us to see how many people are playing the game, how long they are playing it. And so every weekend, we see that number increase, the amount of people that have the game. But we also see that the average time that people are playing game is increasing, day after day. So it basically means that the entire group of players continues to play, so they don't quit. Right? It goes slowly, but it consistently. And so that means that they are persevering for some reason. And we get a lot of mails from people like say, I hated you for the entire night. Then I played again, I played another 9 hours. Trying a different approach through it. I have a lot of feedback actually. I'm not 100% sure if it's true that people need that much guidance initially. And if they really... I can imagine if you are I have too much feedback right now.
You're shouting.
I am.
Yeah.
Getting excited, Sven.
Man's excited. The man's excited.
If you were here, Jesse.
All right.
Look, you can always invite me back. I have no problem. Feel free to fist fight me there. You can come
We
at
will,
me.
Jesse. We will. You remember those ambushes in Original Sin?
Oh,
So anyway, I mean, there is a certain point there. Again, it's not something like it. We should go in an extreme. I think we should go somewhere. Try to make it maybe a little bit less frustrating for people that get bombarded, indeed, because we've seen that, and we know that we're very bad at tutorials, which is probably also part of the issues that we've encountered. But I would be very careful, I think, in modifying it too much, because otherwise we're going to create the experience that pretty much everybody else is creating for players, which is where we would like to stay away from.
I mean, if your goal is to create something new and exciting and different from what else is out there, you guys have already done that. So I don't think that's a problem for you. I think everyone, even the reviews, all saw it for being as like a unique experience as it was. It was fun. I think everyone agrees it was a fun experience. I think if you're going to go about creating a new game, you need to hone that experience. And I think that's what you're trying to do. I think that's the whole point of this, is to hone that and make it better. So I feel like having all this input from all the fans of the game, and I guess the franchise in general, I feel like there's a lot there that is really, really on point. And I think it comes down to what game you want to make and what story you want to tell and how you want to do that. Because we can say as many things as we want, like change this and this and this and this. But if you're set on having it be a certain way, the best thing I can say then is find a way to make, it as open and explorative as possible, but at the same time find a way to also make it so the things that you are giving us don't screw us for wanting to do what you want us to do, right? Like, if the game's about exploration, don't punish us for then wanting to go explore, right? Let us go explore, make us go explore, right? It shouldn't be like, if the game's all about random items, don't punish us for having too many random items, like that kind of thing, right?
Uh-huh.
It's one of those things like where it's the give and take of the game. And I feel like that's where you guys that's the world you should be in right now. Like, we have what we want, we know what we want it to be. How can we make it as available and accessible to everyone who would want to play it? I think that's where you guys should be right now. Is finding that spot, that sweet spot.
That's pretty much what we're looking for. That's
Yep.
true. All right. Okay. All right. Final question, Jesse. Well, yeah, I guess so. Was there anything in terms of character development system that you felt that you couldn't do? So if you were developing your character, it's a fairly free system. You can build a lot of classes, or we didn't really have classes. Did you feel like there was certain areas of development of your character that were really missing in the game system, if you remember?
I don't know how to describe it, but one of the things that I noticed, and this might be back to the randomness, I'm not sure, but sometimes I'd be playing the game, and then I'd be talking to a friend who's playing a game. We might be at the exact same spot, but they have different spells and things than I do, and the difficulty by not having certain things was it was frustrating at times. And I feel like that was something that really, when it came to character building, was a problem. Other than that, I thought you guys had so much there to work with that I really didn't have a problem. I enjoyed all the different things that were there. So I thought that was great. But I think I'm not sure if maybe it was just me and it was a fluke and maybe I missed a spell or something, but every once in a while you would come across a situation where it's like, I really need this, but I don't have it. And then I'd ask a friend, like, where the hell how are you doing this? And they'd be like, well, I'm just using my firebolt or whatever it was, and I'm doing fine. I'm like, I don't even have that, right? And so it's one of those things where it really, like, I don't know how I screwed up. I might have killed someone that had it, but
there is that.
Yeah. So I think that would be my only complaint.
Yeah, that was also actually making it an item that you had to find a book, and sometimes there was only one book, which you could create your own book through crafting. That was also part of that design, and that's the danger indeed, that people get frustrated. Like, I really want to do that spell, but then the hope was that it was going to almost create like mini adventures that you create for yourself. I need to get that spell, so I'm going to do this and this and this. such that I will get that spell. Or maybe kill the other guy and steal it from him. Although you couldn't do that in this particular version of the game. All right. Well, Jesse, it was fantastic having you here.
Thank you. It was fantastic to be here.
Yeah, it was definitely insightful. I was glad to hear.
Yeah, no, it was great to have you here too, asshole. yeah, thanks. All right,
Last time we're calling that guy.
Cut him off. He's done.
Take him offline. Come on.
Oh, actually, no. It was. I remember I enjoyed our discussions when you were back here about the game. I thought they were insightful back then. That's going to be good enough for today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us and for all the suggestions on the forums, sending them through here. As you probably realize, we are working on our new RPG. We're not ready to talk about exactly what it is yet, but it is going to build further on the framework that we built with Original Sin. It's more than an add-on. It's not an add-on. It's really a new game that we're making. We're not going to waste our time on DLCs and what have you. So, as I said, we're a limited team and we want to make a big worlds. We learned a lot of lessons from Original Sin. We've seen things you liked. We've seen things you disliked. There's things that we didn't like ourselves in the game that we did because we had not enough people working on it, or we only realized too late in the production process of what we did wrong. So you'll see a lot of things change, but we hope that we're going to keep these things that you liked in Original Sin and improve on that. I think that probably somewhere along the line we'll do another DevLine, and then we'll talk about all the other stuff I didn't talk about today. And yes, never mind. All right, take care, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and until next time, bye bye.
Cheerio.
Bye-bye.